Welcome everyone to today's webinar on Anthos. It is about the modern application platform for hybrid and multi-cloud on Google Cloud. Today I will present along with Andy Zhou. So I can give a short introduction of myself. My name is Jason Quirk and I'm the CTO of Devoteam Cloud Services. And I'm happy to have everyone here to talk a little bit about Anthos, a very interesting subject for us. So let's jump into the agenda. Today we'll cover three main sections. We'll talk about why Kubernetes and Anthos. We'll dive into some of the use cases and some of the opinions around Kubernetes and Anthos that may be best delivered by Andy. And then we're going to give you a roadmap about how to get started with Kubernetes and Anthos and how to deploy this modern application platform for your company and really modernize your application environment. Just some logistics. There is a Q&A link over there, so it is a link to a Jamboard. Feel free to go to that Jamboard and add any questions or any comments you might have into the Jamboard. Thanks. So Andy.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Jason. So I will advance here. So quick introduction. My name is Andy Zhou. I'm based in Zurich. So for the past 2 years, I've been focused on Kubernetes partnerships, right? Trying to foster the ecosystem that's growing up around Kubernetes. I roll up to an organization within Google called Partner Engineering. So I work with awesome partners like Devoteam, and together we go deep into Google's products like Anthos, and then we go serve customers together, right? So I personally cover the DACH region. This is Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. But of course, Devoteam is Europe-wide, right? So quick words about what does it mean, partnerships and partner ecosystem. It's been really exciting to see over the past 2 years. We've been really trying to grow this, again, this ecosystem around Kubernetes, right? So at the top, you have these great ISVs, right? These independent software vendors who have now rebased their offering, rebased their product to be containers first, to run it on top of Kubernetes, right? So a really good example here is Confluent. Some of you may have heard of them. These are the guys who created Apache Kafka. So Confluent has a fully managed Kafka in all three public clouds, like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and they're running their product is in terms of native Kubernetes, right? It's native containers running their fully managed service on top of GKE, for example. So for the past 2 years, I've been really focused on working with this ISV ecosystem above Kubernetes to make sure their software runs rock solid on Kubernetes and then in turn on Anthos. And then quickly underneath, we have these OEM partners, right? So if you think of models like Android, for example, we have OEM partners like Samsung and LG, HTC, and so forth. It's the same idea here. We have these great hardware makers who have certified against Anthos, integrated with Anthos, and are able to sort of ship you hardware into your data center with Anthos pre-installed. So the past 2 years has really been around the fostering this ecosystem, and now the focus this year is really working with services companies, modernization consultants, Devoteam being an awesome example of this, one of the best. Devoteam has invested in Kubernetes and containers very early on. They're one of our strongest partners in Anthos. So yeah, we think it's ready for prime time. So that's what I do, just really quick. Been 8 years at Google, spread across New York City and San Francisco. Last year, I moved to Switzerland. My partner, she took a job at Roche, and suddenly I found myself in Switzerland. It's amazing. But almost 9 years at Google, mostly in the US. Was very focused on this transition from desktop to mobile. working with our advertising partners. Everything was very desktop focused before, right? All of their SDKs, all of the ways advertisers integrated with Google was very desktop first, right? So changing the entire tooling to be mobile first is what I focused on. Fast forward to 2014, this happened, causing me to move to California, and we're here. So as Jason mentioned, the first part here is especially for those who don't spend their day-to-day in containers and Kubernetes and cloud native, it's really important to focus on the why, right? So Kubernetes has a set of opinions that can seem like they come from nowhere. So this section is about really talking about the motivation. And Jason showed me this slide that I liked very much. There's like what we are doing, there's how the stuff works. And of course, with an audience like this, there tends to be a lot of focus on how does it all work. But then here, kind of the colored one is the why. Like, why do things this way? And I think spending the first maybe 4 or 5 minutes covering what is the motivation behind doing things this way is what we wanted to kick off with. So it really comes down, why was this thing created? Right? It seems to have come from nowhere. For those of you working in it day to day, it seems like maybe in an eternity already. But Kubernetes is 5 years young, right? When innovations like this come out of Silicon Valley or wherever, it takes time, right? It takes time. There's a whole lot of experimentation going on. And these things really take time to mature. So 5 years young, what is the core problem we're trying to solve, right? You're in here in these crazy abstractions that Kubernetes gives you, service mesh gives you. What are we trying to do, right? If we can't answer that clearly, then sort of the how doesn't really matter, right? So the why is sort of a screen that looks like this. So when Jason and I go talk to companies, or we talk to companies in manufacturing, in retail, banking, and financial services, it's no secret that customers are starting here, right? They're starting in this on-prem environment, just highly complex, highly heterogeneous. You name it, they got it. It's a very complex environment. And I would say that as they look to the public cloud, as they look to these managed services that they want to tap in the public cloud, it doesn't necessarily get better. And I say it doesn't get better because these environments, guys, they weren't designed to be interoperable, right? At least in the case of the top, the row at the top, these are competitors, right? We're competitors. These environments, the way we approach networking, storage, the way our managed services work, they weren't designed to play well together. And certainly compared to the on-prem environment today, it definitely wasn't designed to work well together. So they find themselves in this really tough position of they want to modernize. It's hard to know where to start. These banks we talk to have, in some cases, tens of thousands of applications. Some of them running on virtualized infrastructure. Some of it is packaged apps, like from Oracle and SAP, for example. It's just really tough to know, like, how do I begin? What is the stack, right? What is, as any developer knows, the stack matters a lot. What is the stack I'm going to use? Maybe there was a time we can say, well, I'm a Java enterprise developer, or I'm a .NET developer, and that was my stack. And you find that environments like this, because they're so different and complex, the choice of a stack really determines how fast you can move. So in summary, our customers are needing a lot of help in how to modernize. What does modernize even mean, right? Does it mean lift and shift what I have and then replace some of the components with managed services? What does it even mean to modernize? And just the last little bit before we dive into details is that this has happened several times before, and the approach maybe isn't so new, right? So today we have these public hyperscalers, these public clouds, yesterday we had these sort of desktop class platforms, right? Windows, Mac OS, and of course Linux on the server side. And just like the picture I just showed, these weren't necessarily designed to be interoperable either, right? And maybe I'm not showing iOS and Android as two of the mobile platforms. These kind of platforms weren't designed to be interoperable. And it wasn't until the mid 90s, right, mid to late 90s, that emerged this browser. I'm not talking about Chrome, right? I'm talking about Netscape, Internet Explorer, and then later on things like Firefox and Chrome. The browser on the client side, right, in terms of the client side of computing, really standardized everything, right? I'm presenting this to you right now through a browser. It's this category of web apps standardized the way software got delivered to people on the front end, right? And it's still my favorite example, right? It's my favorite example because it does two things, right? The first thing it does is that it sort of abstracts the underlying platform, right? So then it doesn't really matter if you're on Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS, or Android. Users expect the same experience regardless of where they're running the browser. That's the first thing it does. The second thing it does is that it gives us better abstractions, right? Web apps have properties that are cool, right? You have these blue hyperlinks where you click a link and an entire new app is sort of streamed to you, right? YouTube, you go to YouTube, you can go to Facebook, go to google.com, and that is just fundamentally different from these thick client installed apps. So this kind of long-running analogy is what I'm trying to make is that the industry's been looking for something like this, right? Something like the browser, to standardize the environments and to move practitioners up to a higher layer, right? To a higher abstraction that's not just so infrastructure focused. And we really believe Kubernetes plays that role. Rather than sitting on top of a single PC, Kubernetes is an open source piece of software that sits on top of entire clouds, right? Entire server clusters, and serves to standardize that. So Anthos has its basis in open source Kubernetes, has its basis in open source Istio, and this is our point of view about how you modernize. Right? It's this consistent runtime that runs consistently everywhere. I think in the interest of time, I'm just going to, some of this history stuff, if we have time, we'll come back, but I don't want to kind of steal from Jason's thunder. So with this, I think I'm just going to, this is just a bit of the evolution of containers and how it's led up to today. If we have time, we'll go back to it. I really want to get to the meat of it. So with this, Jason, maybe I turn it over to you for the use cases.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I will share my screen.
Okay. We'll do a pass. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Great. So you should be able to see my screen now. So let's jump into use cases about how Anthos can help your company. So Anthos is a 100% software-based solution, which means that there is no hardware you purchase. You purchase only the software. And within the Anthos license, you get a few components that make up Anthos as a product. First, you get the container management. This is what is commonly referred to as Anthos GKE. So yeah, that includes GKE on-prem. There is your on-prem stack that runs on VMware. That can run on Azure, can run on AWS, or can run on bare metal. So the ability to run Kubernetes on different clouds and on different environments. Next, you get the service management and the policy management. So in service management is the Anthos service mesh. So you're able to track which of your microservices talk to each other, manage their SLAs, manage their responses, manage their availability, how you deploy them. And with policy management, you are able to write policy as code, which can define what is allowed into your clusters. So this is to prevent cluster drift. So that there is often you run Kubernetes, but you have technicians that perhaps do things ad hoc on the fly, and this creates misconfiguration of clusters that can create insecure environments and insecure applications. So with policy management, you actually lock down your cluster and make sure that nothing is misconfigured according to how you like it. And next, you have application development. So with GCP Marketplace, you are able to deploy applications directly into your Anthos-enabled clusters, on-prem, in the cloud, and across different providers. So a truly hybrid multi-cloud experience. And lastly, you have operation management. So the logs of all your services can either be stored on-prem or in the cloud as well. And on the cloud, you can, of course, leverage the scalability of the cloud to basically archive your logs for long-term use. So let's jump into one use case, and this is about hybrid cloud for data locality. So in this demo, I want to jump a little bit into this demo we call a bank of Anthos. So it's just a sample demo application. What we have built here is we have an on-prem environment. In the on-prem environment, we have deployed GKE on-prem, which is Kubernetes, which runs on VMware. And on the cloud, in Google Cloud, we have deployed GKE, which is Google's Kubernetes engine. And what we have done is we have created a service mesh, which means that my cloud cluster can talk to my on-prem cluster as if they are one cluster. So my microservices are communicating over private IP space. And at the same time, I can deploy my front-end services in the cloud where I have no issues with, for example, distributing a web page or serving a website. But I store my account data on-prem. So for example, my ledger data, my user data. And if that has certain financial regulations and there's a plight on those data, you can store it on-prem according to your own needs. So let's jump into this demo. So we have also tried this out ourselves. So we have our own stack that we run in-house in Office. This is our on-prem server. So let's go into the VMware environment. So this is how GKE on-prem normally looks like. What you do is you provision VMware, you install VMware EXI, and then on top of it, you install VMware VCSA, so the vCenter Server Appliance. In there, you normally will create an admin workstation. From the admin workstation, you run basically 2 or 3 commands. And these 2 or 3 commands, the first command is mostly to initialize it. Second command is to create load balancers. Load balancers that basically distribute load into your user clusters in Kubernetes. And the third command, you basically you create your Kubernetes clusters. You have an admin cluster as well as a user cluster. So this is how normally Anthos clusters are created. You have an admin cluster that monitors a user cluster. So in user cluster is where you deploy your actual workloads. And this is what the hard work that has been done by Google already. They have created this tool, and this tool talks with the vCenter APIs to actually instantiate these virtual machines in VMware and install Kubernetes on it. So you can theoretically get a GKE on-prem environment running within, I would say, 1 hour will be no problem, as long as all the networking requirements are met. So in the cloud, how does this look on the cloud? So this is my on-prem environment. So you can see it's like localhost.lan. Now let's jump to the cloud environment. From cloud environment, what you do is that you register your cluster into your Google Cloud console. So from here, you can see that I have actually registered my Stockholm. So I'm based in Stockholm, and I've actually registered my on-prem Kubernetes cluster in my Google Cloud environment. You can see it's based in Stockholm. At the same time, I have my cloud environment, which I have from a different project which I have placed in Finland because Google has a cloud region in Finland. And this is my GK cluster. So from one panel, I can actually see both my Kubernetes clusters. So this is really, to me, that as a technician, this is really easy to manage, right? So I can dive into my workloads over here. So from here, I can see that in one panel, I can see all my services that are running in what is running in Finland and what is running in Stockholm. So you can see that my accounts database is a stateful set is running in Stockholm. While, for example, my front end is running in Finland. And you can see that, for example, in Stockholm, I have this is actually based on Postgres DB. So just a simple Postgres DB instance. And what's great about Anthos as well is that you are actually able to deploy directly into these clusters. So if you go here, this is my, remember again, this is my on-prem cluster. I can actually deploy new services to my on-premise clusters as long as I give my image path, or I can go to the marketplace. So we go to marketplaces, I go to Kubernetes apps, and I go to GK on-prem. So imagine if I want to just deploy GitLab. So imagine installing GitLab on your on-prem environment would take you at least a few hours to configure the VMs, make sure that everything is set up correctly. But with Anthos, you're actually able to just click on configure, choose the cluster that you want, and then deploy it. It's just easier, as simple as that. So this allows you to kind of leverage the marketplace and deploy different kind of components you need on your on-premise environment as well. So it really reinforces the idea that your on-prem environment is actually part of the cloud. So you really get a truly hybrid cloud experience. Next, let's jump into the actual microservices. So let's go back.
And real quickly, this ties in very nicely. What Jason just showed ties into that the ISV ecosystem, right? So partners like Confluent, for example, you can deploy a fully managed Apache Kafka in any cloud you wish, and even an on-prem. You can do that directly from the marketplace. It was a cool tieback.
Exactly. So for me, that was really a time saver when I'm doing these applications. So jumping into this, let's look a little bit into how the microservices interact. So let's just set up Kiali, just do some port forwarding onto our cloud cluster. And let's also look at the application. So the application looks something like this. It's just a simple demo application. You sign in. And you have things like you can check your transaction history, you can check your current balance, you can deposit funds and send payments. So we want to send at least $100. But what's happening in the back end now is that you're calling the front end service, microservice deployed in Finland, and it's now sending a payment request to a different user. It's writing the change in the amounts to the user in the database in Stockholm. And it does this seamlessly. So if you look at Kiali now, this is how it works. So Kiali is just a way of visualizing a mesh. You can see that to a developer, this actually is one entire service mesh. So you have the front end communicating to your transaction history. Transaction history service talks to your ledger DB, which is in Stockholm, and write some data to it. For example, there was a transaction occurring. So with this kind of setup, you can basically, you're able to abstract a lot of these complications when you write hybrid applications. So imagine if you don't have something like a service mesh in place, you will have to actually figure out which of the IP addresses, which DNS you need to write to, and make sure that it's routed correctly into your on-prem environment. With Anthos Service Mesh, you're able to create this combined mesh that it allows you to get one single pane of understanding about how your services and requests flow across the entire hybrid cloud. Yep. And what's also interesting is that you're allowed to, you're also, with going back to policy management, you're also allowed to configure what are you allowed to deploy in which environment. So let's jump a little bit into the on-prem environment and So in here, I've actually created something called a policy. In this policy, I can just show you a little bit. This is part of the Anthos product as well. Is that for my Stockholm, my Finland cluster, I'm only allowed to run certain containers, and these containers have to come from certain repos. This repository defines is so it's a policy I implement onto my clusters. I'm only allowed to run containers from either this repository, the Bank of Anthos repository, or from Istio. And this basically forces me so that I can deploy insecure applications or containers or images that may not be validated by the company, or they might violate, for example, certain regulations. So if today I have a developer that wants to make a change, for example, and I show you the change. I want to deploy a new front end into my clusters. And in this front end, actually, I tried my own developer environment and I choose a different image. So now I'm actually pulling this image from a different repository, just my dev environment, because developers often like to experiment. Let's just apply this. Apply change. Now what happens in the cluster? Let's take a look at the front end service. You can see there's actually something called the validation.gatekeeper. What is this? Is actually the policy management in action. It actually rejects the request from the user to deploy this container because it doesn't meet the allowed repos requirement. So what this gives you is the ability to actually define these policies across the different clusters to ensure that your application is secure. You do not use containers that have not been validated by the company and by your regulations and your CISO team. So this allows you to prevent what you call cluster drift, so that you can maintain allowed to still experiment, you're allowed to develop, but still within a controlled structure. You don't have to manually go and figure out what is deployed correctly, what is not. So this is how you will maintain a regulated environment across a hybrid cloud. And note that these policies can be applied both on-prem and on the cloud. So you can maintain a very standardized way of working. Now the second usefulness of Anthos is actually in SRE. So SRE is site reliability engineering, and this is a concept that really Google earlier embraces. And you can see from its products, the products of the Anthos service mesh. And I can recommend you to really read this book if you haven't read of this concept of SRE before. It's actually free and available from the link over there. And what it mentions in SRE, it mentions that you should create, for example, SLOs, or SLAs, and SLIs. What are these things? Service level objectives. And let's jump a little bit into sample application again. So this again is online boutique. So this is just a simple retail example. You have a retail store. So this has no on-prem requirements. You can run this thing purely on the cloud. But how does Anthos help in that scenario? Let me show you how. So a simple retail app, but within Anthos, you're also able to install something called Anthos Service Mesh. In Anthos Service Mesh, you get a list of all your services that is available and running on your cluster. For example, I want to have the front end as well. So now as a development team, I want to create certain service level agreements and service level objectives I want to create on this, because I'm in retail, right? I want to make sure that my website is running and that it's fast to respond, because there's actually studies that show that every second that your website actually takes longer to respond, you actually lose sales. So that affects it. So with Anthos Service Mesh, you can actually click on the service. So we just go into front end service and create an SLO. So what you do is that normally you can choose between two kinds of SLIs, service level indicators. You can choose either availability or latency. So let's pick availability, which just means how long is the site up. Let's set a compliance target of 99.5. And I want to measure this SLO for the entire month, right? And see how am I doing. I also add a window SLO to see within the last 5 minutes, what is my target as well. So I created SLI, everything is 100% because I have my functioning website. Things are working great. I create alerting policy as well. So what this means is that if my service level indicator of availability is burning too fast, at a burn rate of 6 perhaps, over the last 5 minutes, send me an email or drop me a Slack message or send me a page, depending on what kind of notification channels you have set up. So let's pick email.
And as Jason is taking us through this, it really starts to show what is the value of having a platform like Anthos, right? So for the practitioners out there, imagine how you would piece something like this together with open source Istio, right? Download open source Istio off GitHub. You're responsible for the control plane. You're responsible for Citadel issuing certificates, rotating certificates. With Anthos, what Jason is showing you, you didn't have to do anything. You install Service Mesh, and all this comes out of the box.
Exactly. So, like for me, it took about, I would say, half a day just to set everything up correctly how I like it. So it's really, really fast to get it going. Yep. And so now with my alert setup, what I can do is that, again, I will deploy a new version of my new code. And in this version, I just introduced a bug. So I basically crashed the application, right? Sorry. Let me just change my context to the new cluster.
Too many clusters to manage, right?
Yeah, that's why it's good to have something like policy management. You don't deploy the wrong thing. So I can just show you a little bit about how deployment script looks like. So what I'm doing actually is that I'm deploying a new container, new deployment, and I'm using a new image. In this image, I've injected some errors. So as this comes online, you can see that, okay, I have my users, they're running and getting responses. Now it crashes. So there's a bug reintroduced, and now your site is down. What happens now is that let me just send off a few hundred requests to show you how it affects the SLI. Now just benchmarking against the online.com, and what you can see from that is that it takes a while to come through as well.
So just to reiterate, every pod you have, Anthos Service Mesh is injecting the Envoy proxy into all of your pods. So all of this stuff you're seeing in the console happens without you having to do anything, right? You give Anthos Service Mesh permission to inject this proxy. Then, of course, through the proxy, we're able to see all this networking traffic, right? So again, this is how do you make that getting started experience immediate, right? Is a real goal of Anthos.
Yes, exactly. So as we make this, so let's give it a while. Is there any questions in the meantime about how all this is set up? So what's really good is that your ability to get out of the box these features to create SLOs on the fly, to create this alerting, and to actually track all your indicators so that you can check your error budget as well. So if you read the SRE book, there is the concept of error budget, which you can negotiate with your product management to see, for example, there's always a trade-off, right, between the amount of releases you do of a service or application versus the stability of the application. So what SRE really brings to light is that if you have met your error budget, maybe you should think about how do you improve it? How do you improve stability of your service? And that becomes a very high priority. But the thing is that you get actually metrics for that. You can actually track that and view it. So you can see as the failures come in, your service level indicator starts to drop. It starts to drop from 100% to 99.4. And as more traffic comes to your system, into your application, you continue to drop until it hits whatever it is. And then you get an alert in an email, something like this, where it shows you that there you have exceeded your burn rate and it's firing on the alert. So please do something. Right.
So what happened there, Jason? So that you're generating artificial traffic to hit the service.
Exactly.
And that is causing you to burn error budget?
Exactly. It's to actually burn the service level indicators. Yeah. So you're now getting basically response 500s to show that your indicator is dropping.
Got it. Got it.
Exactly.
So the two major metrics are availability, like you're showing here, and the other one's latency, right?
Yes, exactly. So latency also
those
is
are the two ones people monitor the most often.
Yep. Because both will affect your user experience as well.
Yep. So yeah. So again, throughout this whole talk, guys, I'm Jason's wearing kind of the engineering hat, and I guess I'll wear a bit more of the product hat, right? Kind of need both sides. So I can't emphasize enough, right? I think what Jason just showed, this almost approach, this philosophy of site reliability engineering, this idea that you're able to monitor all of your services. You're able to sort of look at those golden signals, right? Latency, throughput, errors, right? Latency, throughput, errors. You're able to see that for all of your pods out of the box. This is this idea of Anthos Service Mesh, this SRE first approach. This is Google's one company, right? This is Google's interpretation of how you might use what? Open source Istio, right? So my point here is that at this point, 5 years into this cloud native revolution, open source Kubernetes, Docker, open source Istio, the Knative project, these are table stakes, right? They're nothing more than open source projects. They're very important components, but when you're evaluating vendors, really judge them on what is their point of view about how do you use these things, right? Okay, you're great. You have open source Istio installed in your cluster. How do you actually get productive with it? And I think what Jason just showed is it's a big delta, right? Going from open source Istio to a coherent product which is what Anthos Service Mesh is trying to be. This very SRE approach to monitoring your services. Oh yeah. Is there anything else here you wanted to show, Jason? Any other live demo part you wanted to show, Jason?
No, that's it.
That's it. Okay, MLOps.
Great. So the last use case I'd like to go over is about MLOps with hybrid cloud. So this is something that we gave a previous talk about, and how we use actually Kubeflow to build a lot of machine learning models. And we've seen that with Kubeflow, you can deploy it both on Kubernetes as well as GKE on-prem, which means that you get this integrated experience of machine learning as well. And you can build machine learning as a service using this hybrid cloud approach as well, using GKE on-prem. So you can say that the Anthos product really fits in different use cases, both from serving application as well as leveraging different kind of pipelines as well. And we also like to mention some of the customers that have also used Anthos before. Like for example, HSBC uses the Anthos managed hybrid cloud environment, as well as Kaiser Kompressor based over in Germany. And also recently, you heard about Google Cloud winning the defense contract in Americas for using Anthos to manage multi-cloud across Azure and AWS. So you can see that really there is a big momentum in the industry embracing Anthos as a product. But let's pass it back to Andy to talk a little bit about the Google's opinions behind Anthos.
Cool. So I'll quickly run through this, guys. Thank you, Jason, for showing that. That was awesome. I would have been scared to show those demos live. So I really wanted to, this section is called Anthos Opinions. Right, so I had spent a year on the GKE product team, and just sort of staying up at night thinking, like, what is, in a world where we have open source Kubernetes, open source Istio, open source Knative, Docker, in a world where we have these sort of free and available on GitHub, what is the role of a product, right? What is the role of the product company who's trying to create a coherent product behind these open source components? I think what Jason showed is a pretty good example of that, right? You have very, very low level infrastructure, which is the constructs available to you in Istio, to be able to up-level that to this service mesh in which out of the box you're getting those golden signals for all of your pods without the developer having to do anything, right? You see errors, latency, throughput for all of your pods. Simply because we're able to inject this proxy, you get all of that visible to you from the cloud, regardless of where your services are running, right? So what I'm trying to say is that as a product company, it's Google's job to figure out those user journeys. And then if we think we've identified a user journey that's important, it's our job to make people productive as soon as possible, right? So Jason was able to spin that up in minutes without having to do a ton of configuration. So this section is it's definitely not exhaustive. I just wanted to show you a few examples of this opinions, right? So if you advance one slide, this has just been a long time ask where absolutely, right, talented engineers who spend their days in open source, they could wire a solution like this together by hand. With Anthos, oftentimes the secret sauce, when we get it right, we don't always get it right, but when we get it right, it's usually something in the open source combined with something in the cloud. Some asset that Google has in the cloud combined with the open source, that is the magic, right? So as Jason showed, open source Istio combined with this fully managed service mesh by Google. That's one example. In this example, in the top blue icon is Google's Layer 7 HTTPS load balancer, right? This gives your application, this has nothing to do with Kubernetes, right? Gives your app a single global IP. Google's having over 100 POPs, or 100 kind of points of presence across the planet, so that when a user sends traffic, right, is trying to send traffic to your services, that traffic is going to be very close to Google's network. Doesn't matter if you're in Stockholm, if you're in Asia, if you're in the States. That traffic is going to hit Google's front end. It's going to hit Google's global load balancer. If you're trying to do an ingress, it can terminate TLS right there. And then from there, it can route traffic directly to your pods. This is an example of, okay, everyone has open source Kubernetes. Everyone can create ingress objects, right? But Google's trying to bring its assets with Anthos. You have the global L7 HTTPS load balancer that is sort of able to receive traffic from anyone in the world and then route traffic to the closest cluster, to your closest cluster that still has capacity, right? So you have a cluster in Singapore, cluster in Switzerland, cluster in Iowa. Traffic hits that global load balancer and is able to just intelligently route that traffic to the nearest cluster. And all this is just the ability to group those clusters together in an easy to use UI. This is the job of a product company, right? That's sort of what you're paying us for, right? Maybe I over obsess about this, right? So I think, what is the job of a product company? If you think of a company like Tesla, they're not just selling you the electric engine separately from the transmission system, separately from like the windshield wipers, right? It's their job to piece it all together into a coherent product that works out of the box, right? Because very few of us have 5 years to burn to try and glue all this together, right? The damn thing should just work. So multi-cluster ingress is, again, one of those things that you get out of the box, and it's a combination of open source Kubernetes, the ingress object, which is native to Kubernetes, plus Google's global L7 load balancer. So that's one example, right? So being mindful of time, you skip to the next one. Jason, this ends in 7 minutes. Is that right? Or do we have?
Yeah, it does. But I think we can give it a shot. Give it a shot.
Okay, I will be mindful. Again, so what I'm showing here is at this point 5 years young. It's another opinion, right? Again, anyone can get open source Kubernetes off of GitHub. And if you've been playing around with Kubernetes, there's these control plane components, things like the API server. That's how you talk to Kubernetes. You issue kubectl commands against it. There's the scheduler piece that's responsible for making scheduling decisions. Guys, we're 5 years into this thing, and it's heartbreaking when we visit retailers, we visit manufacturers who are like spending years trying to figure this stuff out, because it's not so easy, right? How you scale these control plane components, how you replicate etcd so that there's no single point of failure, how you back up and restore etcd, all this stuff. It's sort of like when you fire up Windows and fire up Mac OS, and you look at like the task manager, right? When you see all your running processes and the resources it's using, this is stuff like, as a user, I just expect to freaking work, right? I don't, and of course, as engineers, we like to tinker, we like to see how it works. But as a product company, this is a type of component that should just be abstracted away. And that's exactly how GKE and Anthos works, right? Whether you're running on GKE, on Amazon, on-prem, we are taking care of the control plane pieces for you, right? So the Kubernetes control plane, we're responsible for replicating it. We're responsible for backing it up. We're responsible for scaling it, right, based on what's happening in your cluster. And I can't emphasize enough that these opinions are hard won, right? These opinions have to come from engineers who spend their lives kind of using these systems. These opinions don't come from nowhere. And it's ultimately the reason to choose something like Anthos, right? Because again, these pieces are in the open source, but opinions about how to operate them in production in a way that takes away burden is ultimately what we're trying to do with Anthos. So one for Jason. Maybe this is the last one before I turn it back to you. Here's another one that is not available in the open source. This idea that you can partition your clusters. You have a Kubernetes cluster, in this case running out of Belgium, and the ability to create pools of not similar, but pools of identical machine types, right? So I can say I have this pool that has local SSD attached. Maybe you're doing very high I/O type things. You want to use SSD flash storage as scratch space for your stateful sets. Maybe you have another pool right next to it that is that has GPUs attached to each machine. Maybe you're doing training an ML model. And then right next to that, you have another pool running a specific OS image. And then after that, next to that, maybe you have another pool that has preemptible VMs. So what I'm trying to show here is that this magic, this very popular feature of node pools, is not just open source Kubernetes that you grab off of GitHub. This magic is possible because the engineers who built it, these awesome guys and gals who built this, are pairing that open source Kubernetes with the richness of the public cloud, with the fact that on GCP, you can spin up these clusters with SSD attached, GPU attached, any OS image you want in minutes, in some cases seconds. And I think it's this combination that is the magic. And again, we don't always get it right, but when we get it right, it's just this magical experience. I think we got it right with GKE. Anyone who's used GKE, that experience, I think our opinions there are right. We're now trying to do the same outside of GKE, right? Which is on-prem, on AWS, on Azure, and at the edge. So, yep. So if you just advance, the last two is about high availability. Same thing, right? With a single click, we are replicating the control plane across 3 different geographies. We're replicating the machines that actually run your app, the data plane, the VMs that actually run your precious application. We're automatically replicating that across geographies so that you're not having a single point of failure, so that you're distributing across failure domains. And we are making these choices for you on AWS, on Azure, on vSphere on-prem. Why are we making these choices for you? Because these are low-level choices that have nothing to do with your app. They have nothing directly to do with the business logic that you're trying to take to market, right? So in summary, it's really all about developer productivity. It's always been about productivity and getting something high quality to market quickly. That's it for me, Jason.
Great, thanks. So the last 2 minutes, because it started a bit late, I think 10 minutes late, but I just want to briefly run through how to get started. So just to give everyone an idea about what are the steps to get started to start this application modernization process with Devotee and with Google. So just a bit of input. So there is a licensing model for Anthos. You purchase Anthos licenses in blocks of 100 vCPUs. But in this license, you get access to all these great products like GKE on-prem, GKE on GCP, AWS, and Azure in the future. You have Anthos Service Mesh. You have Anthos Config Management, which includes the policy controller that we just showed as well, Ingress for Anthos. And in the future, with other new functionality that will be included in license as well. So what our deployment strategy is that we will do what we call a pre-study of your environment. We figure out how to build your cloud baseline, your landing zone, and set out all these pieces of your cloud environment in terms of networking, security, operations, and your billing. And in that we have 3 parallel implementation streams. We start to migrate your application containers. If you haven't already migrated your application containers, we help you to set up GKE on-prem on VMware that you've seen before. And we also help you to implement CI/CD and application deployment. And in the meantime, we help to train your engineers on Anthos and Google Cloud and provide, for example, managed services at the end of it to optimize your cloud environment. So some of the deliverables we execute, we check whether is Anthos the right product for you, because it is an investment, it is a strategy that a company has to take for the future. Do you want to be container driven, container based? Do you want to build applications in that manner? We help to design it by your environment, and we produce what I call a report. We help you to qualify your on-premise hardware. You see that it's compatible for the right applications. We also execute an on-site workshop with you to walk through how we actually install Anthos or GK on-prem with you. We help you discover your internal networking requirements and build a networking map, how your GK on-prem should be designed. And we help you to also give you suggestions about Anthos config management and what kind of rules should be implemented in different clusters, so you prevent your applications running in the wrong location, for example. And we also help you to set up Anthos Service Mesh and develop your DevOps capabilities. So we help you implement SLOs, SLIs on different services and make sure that you are able to get this extra insight into your application. And also we help to migrate VMs into containers using this product called Migrate for Anthos. That's also included in the license as well, the Anthos license. So maybe I'll let Johannes touch a little bit about the promo that we have.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, thanks to Andy and to you, Jason, for this informative, inspirational, and I think very tangible webinar. So I think since we're over the time, I'll be very, very brief on this slide. I think, Jason, you've outlined very well now how to get started. And I think during the course of this last hour, everyone got a glimpse of what Anthos can do. We would like to really give everyone a feeling what it can do for you and your company. So what our offer is here, our promo that we're doing together with Google, is that we, from the Devo team side, will help you to plan, deploy, and on a first, should we say, POC, and hope also to help you to train your people or you so you can use Anthos yourself. Google is also doubling down on this by supporting this further, also with credits and with the operational expenses. And last but not least, of course, it takes you, dear customer, to tell us what your use case is, what your ideas are. And I think if we contribute to this evenly, we can work on a great POC that allows you to see the benefits of this great product. And I think Jason and Andy have been very passionate about what the benefits are, and we are very happy to have a follow-up with you, have a conversation on how this can work for you. So feel free to reach out to us today or in the coming days. And yeah, we're happy to take it from there, have a conversation with you. And until then, thank you everyone for your time, and stay happy and healthy. And as Google says, let's get solving.
Thanks, Johannes. Any last word from you?
I just want to say thanks a lot, Johannes. Appreciate it. Yeah, please reach out. Please reach out to Jason or myself. Our emails are here. We're happy to speak with you.
Yeah, if any questions about Anthos and how to, technical questions as well, we'll be glad to help. So that concludes the end of my webinar. And looking at the Q&A list, there's been no questions, and we're over time. So thanks everyone, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks everyone.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.